Hi there, welcome to RentPrep for Landlords. I'm Andrew Schultz, Community Manager here at RentPrep. I'm also a real estate broker and property manager with over 14 years of experience in the rental and property management industries. We're currently in the middle of upgrading our studio to bring you even better content in 2023, so bear with us if the audio and video isn't quite normally what we put out into the world on this episode, but stay tuned because today we're going to be talking about how to go about refunding a security deposit. Let's get to it. First off, before we go any further, I wanted to let you know that this is a great intro video into how security deposit refunds work. And with that being said, every state is going to have different laws with regards to how security deposits are supposed to be collected, supposed to be held, and how they're supposed to be returned to the tenants. So after watching this video, you may need to spend some time supplementing your knowledge by going out and doing some research on what the laws are in your state specifically with regards to security deposit refunds. Not knowing what the laws are in your state could put you in a compromising position in a bunch of different ways, and we'll get into all that into a minute. But first, I wanted to talk about what you can use a security deposit for in the first place. Again, this will vary some from state to state, but generally speaking, you can use a security deposit in a few different ways. The most common way a security deposit gets used is when the tenant causes damage inside of the apartment beyond what is considered reasonable wear and tear or normal wear and tear. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about what is and what is not considered reasonable or normal wear and tear, because we've talked about that in quite a few other videos and podcasts over the course of time, but I will provide just one quick example here so that you can get a feel for what I'm talking about when I mean wear and tear. Wear and tear would be something like scuff marks on the paint on a wall or on some woodwork where a piece of furniture has rubbed up against it during the course of the tenancy. Now, on the other hand, if the tenant knocked a bunch of holes in the wall, that would likely be considered damage. I'm not talking about hanging a couple of pictures, which I'd consider wear and tear in most instances. I'm talking about larger holes that actually require some time and materials to go ahead and patch that stuff up. Now that we've talked a little bit about normal wear and tear, let's talk about cleaning for a second. Can you charge against the security deposit if an apartment is not cleaned at the time of move out? In most states, the answer to that question is going to be yes, but if you're going to charge for cleaning, you need to understand what level the property was cleaned to when it was turned over to the tenants. So you cannot charge a tenant to basically clean an apartment back to hotel clean standards if you only turned it over to them in broom clean condition. And by the same token, if you turn it over in hotel clean condition and a tenant only brings you back an apartment in broom clean condition, in most states, you would be able to charge the difference in cleaning that it would take you to get back to that hotel cleaning level where you want to be when you turn it over to the next tenant. Some states will only require a tenant to return a property in broom clean condition, so that's something that you're definitely going to want to take a look at when doing your additional research. In talking about damages and cleaning, this is where having a great set of move-in photos and move-out photos comes in extremely handy. Being able to compare the state of the apartment at the start of the tenancy versus at the end of the tenancy will really help you to see the differences that occurred over the course of time, which is going to make it a lot easier for you to justify any charges that you have on a tenant's security deposit disposition. Again, we've talked about move-in and move-out photo sets a bunch of times in a bunch of different videos and podcasts, so I'm not going to cover it here, but I will say that when you're doing your photo sets, please make sure that you're going to the length of at least getting the inside and outside of all of your cabinets and all of your appliances, because those are some of the most commonly damaged items that we see when we do turnovers. What else can you charge against a security deposit? In most states, if a tenant has unpaid utility charges, you can charge those against the security deposit at the time of move out. So if a tenant leaves a home and, for instance, they have a water bill that they're responsible for, and after they move out, you get a copy of the water bill and they owe a couple $100s, you can charge that couple $100s back against their security deposit, assuming that that usage was during the time of their tenancy. And obviously, unpaid rent can also be charged against the security deposit. So if a tenant leaves their unit and they owe you a bunch of back rent, you can definitely deduct that from their security deposit. This one is pretty straightforward, and I'm pretty sure that everybody understands that you can use a deposit towards unpaid rent, so there's not really a lot to discuss there. So with all the groundwork laid, let's go ahead and jump into our discussion on the laws surrounding security deposit dispositions for a minute. Every state has a little bit different set of rules, which is why I mentioned that you're probably going to need to do a little bit of additional research to understand what the laws are in your state or in your area. There are a couple things that I want to talk about briefly here that you should definitely spend some time looking into so that you know that you're being compliant with the guidelines of your state. And the first thing that I wanted to mention is move-out inspections. So in some states, you'll actually have to do a pre-move-out inspection and provide the tenant with a list of items that they may be charged for in the event that they're not taken care of prior to the move-out. And depending on the law in your state, the tenant may or may not need to be present for this inspection. Some states don't have any sort of a pre-move-out inspection at all, so this is definitely something that you're going to want to look into when doing your additional research. What about inspections on the day of move-out or after move-out? In my opinion, unless your state requires you to have the tenant present, my recommendation is to do your move-out inspections without the tenant present. The main reason for this is every time you go to look at something in that apartment that may or may not be damaged, if the tenant is with you, every single time they're going to be trying to pull your attention away from whatever you're looking at, trying to tell you that, no, that's how it was when we moved in here, this, that, and the other thing. And honestly, it's a very, very easy way for one of these situations to become contentious when it really may not need to. So if you don't have to have the tenant present during the move-out inspection, my strong recommendation is to not have them present. Essentially, your goal as the landlord or the person completing this move-out report is to spend as much time as you need thoroughly looking over the apartment, documenting what you're finding, and then preparing your disposition letter. If you're in a situation where you're rushed, or you're in a situation where you're being distracted every 30 seconds because a tenant is there, you're not going to be able to properly do your job. So if you're in a position where you don't have to have the tenant present, my recommendation is do the inspection solo and then loop the tenant back in after you're done. The next thing that I wanted to discuss is what are you specifically required to provide to the tenant? In some states, you'll have to provide a disposition letter that breaks down every deduction that you took from the deposit and the reason for that deduction. In other states, you'll be required to provide the tenants with receipts for any work that was completed. In order to charge for that work, they're going to want to see the receipts essentially. And in other states, you are only going to have quotes as to how much it's going to cost to get the work done before you can wrap up that security deposit disposition. A lot of times this is going to depend on how much time the state gives you to complete a security deposit, but not always. Sometimes you'll have a very, very short time frame to complete this work, and you'll have to have the work completed in order to bill it against the security deposit. There are a lot of really, really weird laws out there regarding security deposits, and that's why I'm recommending that you do spend a little bit of time after this video to make yourself familiar with what the requirements are in your area. Since we're already talking about timeframes here, you need to understand that there will be a time frame with which you need to return this deposit. You can't just drag these things out forever and ever, and most states do specify a length of time that you have to return a security deposit after move out. There are some states that don't. Up until 2019, for instance, the law in New York State was that a security deposit needed to be returned within a reasonable amount of time, and there was no actual number of days that was codified into law anywhere. So the generally accepted practice was 30 days, but with there being some vagueness there that could have been used in court in the event that a landlord was taking longer than necessary to get that deposit out, or it was taking them longer to get quotes in, or whatever the case may be, we now have to return that security deposit within a 14-day window. So there's no longer any ambiguity, at least in the New York State law. We now know that it's 14 days, not 30, not 45, not 60, and everything is pretty much written in stone. It's right there in the law. So that was definitely a big change that happened here in the state of New York back in 2019. The last thing that I wanted to touch on before we jump into looking at a couple of disposition letters is the actual return of the deposit. Some states will require you to mail that deposit back first class, and others will require you to mail it certified, and even some will require you to send it both ways, certified and first class. In most states, sending a letter to one tenant when there is multiple tenants on the lease is sufficient, and in other states, you have to send that disposition letter to every tenant that's listed on the lease, along with any guarantors or co-signers or anyone else that may be listed. There may even be requirements to send the funds back in some sort of a certified format, such as a certified check or money order or whatever the case may be. So you're going to want to spend a little bit of time double checking to see what the rules are when it comes to the actual physical format that the check needs to take when it comes to making that deposit. All right, so let's get into the meat of it. I have 2 ledgers and 2 disposition letters that I want to run through with you. The first letter is a tenant that received a refund, and the second is a tenant that did not receive a refund. We're going to take a quick look at the ledgers so that you can see how we apply the charges and things of that nature. And then we're going to take a look at the actual disposition letters so that you can see how we draft those up as well. For the purposes of this video, I'm using documents from our company here at Own Buffalo. If you do need a security deposit disposition letter, honestly, feel free to pause the video and copy and paste my format, or I guess retype my format if that's something that would work in your state. Alternatively, if you go over to the RentPrep website and do a search for security deposit letter, the first article that pops up is the Ultimate Security Deposit Disposition Letter, and that's a free download. So you can check that out over at rentprep.com after this video. And we are going to start with our refund ledger. So we'll start by looking at the information up here at the top. This was generated from our property management software. You can see we had two tenants here, both Ronnie and Rebecca Renter. They lived at 716 Main Street in Buffalo in the upper apartment. That's obviously a fake address. They are past tenants. You can tell that they paid $800 in rent at the end of their tenancy with us, and deposit paid shows 0 because their deposit has already had the disposition done. So when they moved in back in 2017, they were paying $750 a month and paid a $750 deposit. And actually, they were with me so long that they carried with me from my time at Realty Edge over to my time at Own Buffalo, and they had some prepaid rent as a result. Scrolling down, other than that, it's a pretty boring ledger. These guys were very good tenants and made sure that their rent was paid pretty much on time every single month, until we get down here to the final month of the tenancy here, which is going to be the month of July 2021. So you can see they made their June rent payment, had a $0 balance. There was a prepayment here of $400 going into July. The July rent normally would be $800, but this was prorated down to the $412.90, which left them with a balance of $1290. And then obviously Rebecca made her rent payment of $400 on the same day as the rent charge, which gave them a credit of $387.10. They then had $460 worth of move-out repair charges. This is where that shows on our ledger, and we'll go over those repairs when we get to the disposition letter, but they do reflect on the tenant ledger. That brings them to a point where they owe $72.90. And then on this line, you can see that this is their $750 security deposit being applied to the situation, which gives them a credit of $677.10. And then finally, you can see this is the check getting cut back out to them at the end of the tenancy for the $677.10. Now jumping over to their disposition letter, this is our standard format letter. You can see that we sent this letter to both tenants at their new address. Dear Ronnie and Rebecca, enclosed is your security deposit settlement from your tenancy at 716 Main, upper apartment. And essentially it breaks everything down here. $750 for their security. We had to replace some light bulbs and some batteries, so we charged them for that. They broke a mini blind and we had to replace that. And the apartment was not returned to us in the same condition with which the apartment was given to them. And we actually had to have somebody go in and deep clean, which is why we have a charge for over $300 just to clean up their apartment. In the bathroom, they had the I think it was the bathroom lav sink was stopped up with a wad of hair, so that had to be repaired as well. And then finally, they overpaid their July rent based on that new prorate, so there was a refund of that amount. If you do all the math on this, it comes out to an amount returned of $677.10. That matches the bottom of our tenant ledger, and we know that this guy is good to go. A check is being mailed to you. Checks are cut directly by M&T Bank and are mailed from their facility. You should expect your check to arrive separately within 5 to 10 business days. If you don't receive your check, please contact us immediately. And that's basically a note. We don't send the checks from our office. We actually use our bank, M&T Bank. We use their online bill pay to make the check cut, and then that way we have better trackability of the check and whether it's been cashed or where it is in the system and things of that nature. So that system has worked really, really well for us, which is why we let tenants know, hey, your check is coming in a separate envelope. Be on the lookout for it. Now we're going to jump over to our ledger where a tenant left owing us money. And you can see that this is Tommy Tenant. He lived at 123 RentPrep Place in the upper apartment, and he is in an eviction status with a rent of $1,000. And again, deposit paid 0. You'll see why when we get to the end of the ledger, because his deposit's already been disposed of. And again, here at the top, you can see management held security deposit. We did collect a $1,000 security deposit on this. The rest of the ledger is pretty mundane until we get down towards the end of it. And it's worth noting that this is where things started to fall apart here in the month of August. You can see that in the month of August, there were two chargebacks here for $475 and $475. That ties back to credit card payments that were made for rent payments back in the month of June. So unfortunately, we ended up with 2 months after the fact, we ended up with the June rent being pulled back out of our bank account. And as you can see, there was a payment in July But then there was no payment in August, September, October, November, or December. Obviously, this went through an eviction. We don't have the charges on here for his legal fees and things of that nature, and that's probably something we should have talked about earlier in the video. Some states will and some states will not allow you to add legal charges to a tenant's ledger. I don't believe that New York State prevents us from adding them to the ledger. We can't get them awarded to us in eviction court, but we can pursue them in small claims court or in civil court after the fact if we so choose. So we can add those charges. They're just not on this particular ledger yet. And finally, the bottom line here is you can see that the $1,000 security deposit was refunded. Well, not really refunded. It was basically withheld because the tenant owed us a substantial sum of money. And you can see here the $49.50 left owed. And that's all that displays here on the second page as well. Jumping over to the letter here that we sent this tenant. Again, you can pause and use this format if you want. Now, this tenant was evicted, and we did not know where they moved. They did not provide us with their updated mailing address. So we sent the security deposit disposition to them at their last known address, which was our apartment. It's up to them to forward their mail. And in this instance, I don't believe the tenant forwarded the mail. I believe we ended up getting it back in the mail as undeliverable. But that's what we did. We didn't know what the forwarding address is, so we sent it to the last known good address and left it up to the tenant to do his part by forwarding his mail. So moving forward, dear Tommy, closed your security deposit settlement from your tenancy at 123 RentPrep Place in the upper apartment. If you have any questions, contact our office. And then you can see his security deposit, then the June 2022 rent, the unpaid portion, and we'll go back there. I'll show you there were three payments that were made. There were two $475 payments and a $50 payment totaling $1,000. And then obviously the $50 payment was not reversed for whatever reason. So he did make a $50 payment towards June, but had a $950 unpaid portion. And then the August, September, October, November, and December rents are all listed here as completely unpaid. When you do the math, that comes out to a total amount owed of $4,950. And we specifically tell our tenants, you are responsible for all of the above charges resulting from your move out. We do give them the option of creating a payment plan, and we generally give them about 30 days to contact our office to do that. If you choose not to contact us to set up a payment plan, we reserve the right to pursue this debt in court or in collections at our discretion. You can reach our office to schedule your payment plan, or if you have any questions, thank you, Own Buffalo. And that basically tells the tenant that in the event that they don't pay this off or come up with some kind of a payment arrangement that works for us, we do reserve the right to pursue that debt in court or in collections at our discretion, and oftentimes we will do that. So there you have it. Security deposit dispositions don't have to be scary and don't have to be contentious as long as you spend some time understanding what your obligations are before you jump into the deep end of the pool. Were you shocked by any of the obscure laws surrounding security deposits in your state? Do us a favor and drop us a comment down below and tell us all about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Andrew Schultz with OwnBuffalo.com for RentPrep.com, and we'll talk to you soon.